Welcome to In the Word, a study of the International Bible School lesson. Join Dr. Lee Magnus, Professor Emeritus of Bible, and Dr. Bill Gwaltney, Professor Emeritus of Bible, both from Milligan College, as they bring you their thoughts and knowledge of the study of the Sunday School lesson for the day. Now, here is Dr. Gwaltney.
Good morning. Dr. Magnus and I are glad to meet with you this morning as we begin a new quarter's work on the sovereignty of God. And we are going to cover the waterfront. We're going to start in Isaiah, and then we're moving to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, and then we're going to end with the book of Revelation. That's just about taking most of it in, at least.
It is. It's a combination that I never would have thought of, but it's a great combination.
Yes.
We get to see the work of God among His covenant people from three really different perspectives.
Well, in the second unit, the second month, we'll be talking about Jesus. Mm-hmm. And then as we are in the New Testament, then we'll be following Jesus through the book of Hebrews and then in the book of Revelation, right. Where we'll see God the Father and Jesus the Son. Mm-hmm. So here we go.
Yeah. Now, the sovereignty, that's a word we throw around a lot, but it's a great big word that we yes. rarely define. Does it have some special significance that we should know about?
Well, it certainly is a word that the New International Version is fond of. Mm-hmm. It's a good word. In our language, it goes back to Latin, and we know super. Yeah. Super this, super that, and super everything else. Uh-huh. And that's the origin of the word,
so the
linguistically.
The SVR comes from SPR.
Right.
Super,
and
meaning above.
Meaning above,
over.
And over.
Okay, well that fits the idea of sovereignty.
Now, we can substitute another word and we get the idea very well, mm-hmm. superiority.
The superiority of God.
And that would be exactly
mm-hmm.
the idea that the word is mm-hmm. leading us to.
Good. Well, now we start with Isaiah for 4 lessons, so maybe we ought to very quickly set Isaiah in the prophet in his historical context.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there were 4 great prophets of the 8th century in Israel, so both northern and southern kingdoms.
That's the 700s BC.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we have Hosea mm-hmm. and Amos mm-hmm. Just before 750. Mm-hmm. And then we have 2 in the southern kingdom exclusively would be Isaiah and Micah.
And the hints we get from historical comments by Isaiah make it sound like he had a fairly long prophetic career
yes.
in the second half of the 8th century.
Yes.
So 740 to 700 are those approximate dates?
Yes, well, we know approximately the ending of his career mm-hmm. because in the book of Isaiah, in chapters 36 through 39, we have the story of the invasion of King Sennacherib of Assyria. Mm-hmm. Well, as it so happens, we have the same story told in the annals of Sennacherib. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I began my study of Akkadian, Assyrian, that's exactly the passage that we began with. I can remember the first line.
Let me hear it.
Ina shalshi girya ana hati lualik.
All right.
Which means, verily in my 3rd campaign I went to the land of the Hatti, the Hittites, which was Palestine.
Yeah.
Syria and Palestine. So now don't ask me to recite any more of it.
That's great.
I'm done.
That's great. That's enough speaking in tongues for today.
Yeah, I guess.
That's good. Well, what's interesting is
that would be near the end of Isaiah's career. The thing about Isaiah is his career, maybe 40 years long, mm-hmm.
Overlapped
the two great events.
Right.
The fall of the northern kingdom.
That's just what I was going to say, yeah.
And then the attack of
the
Sennacherib.
southern. And so Isaiah prophesied on both sides of the fall of the northern kingdom, the decades leading up to it and the immediate aftermath of it. But he also got to see and talk about a foreshadowing of the coming destruction of the southern kingdom. Although the Assyrians didn't conquer them, we see the seeds of that, which occurred
the beginning of
over 100 years later
Yeah.
Under Babylon. But at any rate, Isaiah is at a very important time. Now, Isaiah is not just a historian. He's a prophet who views all of the events of history from the perspective of God's sovereignty, God's superiority among not only the covenant people, but all nations. He's got a very universal perspective.
And I think there's a reason for that. As I understand the role of his prophetic life and career, I think it was a court prophet. That is, he had access to the kings, immediate access to the kings.
We're talking about the royal court, not a judicial court here.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we know that he was an advisor to King Hezekiah, and Hezekiah took him seriously. Many kings didn't take prophets too seriously, and prophets became rubber stamps, but not Isaiah.
Yeah.
Now he had we can summarize his prophetic message by the way in which he named 3 children. Now Hosea before him had done the same thing, and but now we have 3 children, and their names carry the force of his prophetic message.
Okay. One of the kids means trouble is on its way, right?
Yeah, you're afraid to say that, are you?
I'll say it. You taught it to me. Let me see if I can still do it.
Okay.
Maher Shalal Hashbaz.
Close.
Okay, let's
Maher Shalal Hashbaz.
Okay, very good.
Which is a parallel expression, meaning the spoil of war is coming rapidly upon the southern kingdom.
Okay, so destruction is coming. Now, another of the kids had a more positive meaning to his name. A remnant will return.
She'ar Yashuv.
Okay.
And then finally, the last child has a really strong prophetic name, which we all recognize, Emmanuel.
God with us.
God is with us.
God is with us.
Now, there's the message. We are going to face war, and we're going to face destruction that comes from war. But God is with us. And since God is with us, a remnant will be saved out of this destruction. Okay. And God will then take this remnant, small though it be, and build it into an era of great peace and tranquility in all the earth.
Okay. So now remnant means a small leftover piece, like a remnant of cloth.
Yes.
And so out of this nation, there will at least be a remnant preserved in spite of the destruction. And I believe Isaiah also connected this remnant to those who remained most faithful to God, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And God knows how to preserve the faithful, and He will see to that and then use them for a new attempt at nationhood that will be a nation after His desires.
Okay. Now, the word remnant is not actually used in the passage that we're studying today, our printed text. But I do want to assure our viewers that remnant is the context in which Isaiah is writing or speaking.
Right.
Here.
Give us a couple of samples.
Yeah. So, for instance, just shortly before our lesson text begins in 11:1, chapter 10, verse 20 says this: "On that day, the remnant of Israel and the survivors of the house of Jacob will no more lean on the one who struck them," that's the Assyrian Empire, "but will lean on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth." In other words, the remnant will be the faithful few who put their trust in God, not in kings, not in armies.
Yeah, exactly.
Etc. And then verse 21 goes on to say, "A remnant will return." That's the name of Isaiah's little boy.
Yashuv.
Yeah. "A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. And your people will once again become like the sand of the sea.
Now, chapter 10 then carries on, and then there is a section on destruction that will come upon the earth. And then down in the last verses of chapter 10, behold, the Lord, that's Adon, the Lord of hosts, Yahweh of the armies, will lop the boughs with terrifying power. The great in height will be hewn down, and the lofty will be brought low. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an axe of iron, and Lebanon with its majestic trees will fall.
So God's judgment is chopping down trees, and that brings us to the opening metaphor of our printed text here of a stump.
Well, the cedars of Lebanon were attacked over well over a millennium. People wanted that wood, and so the forests that were once covered the mountains of what is today Lebanon. I think you got to see.
Well, we went to Lebanon many years ago, and I was so excited to see the cedars of Lebanon, mainly because the Solomon's Temple was built out of that wood.
Yes.
And I thought that would be fun to see this beautiful forest of cedars. So I asked the guide to point them out to me, and he said, okay. And so he said, just around this next bend, we'll pull the bus over, and you can get a photo of the cedars of Lebanon. There was one cedar tree with a chain link fence around it. That was it.
That was it.
Yeah, so all these nations have been chopping down the cedars
of Lebanon. And Solomon contributed to the loss.
But here the point is that God's judgment is chopping things down.
Yes.
But the good news in our lesson is that something's going to happen to that stump that will benefit God's kingdom.
And this is a characteristic of some trees that when you cut them down, they'll put out sprouts.
From the live roots.
Yes.
Well, let me read this beautiful passage. We're in Isaiah chapter 11, and I'll begin reading in verse 1. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy, with justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea.
Now there are certain terms that show up here as you have read them that are prophetic catchwords. And we find them in the prophets of the 7th century, Amos, Hosea, Isaiah, and Micah. And let me point them out. First of all, in verse 4, righteousness and justice. Those two terms were picked on and accentuated by Amos and Hosea. Then down in verse 5, righteousness and faithfulness. Faithfulness is the term that comes from the root from which we get the word amen, or amen as you prefer. Means that which is firm.
Okay.
And then we have in verse 9 the expression knowledge of the Lord, and notice Lord is in all caps. The Yahweh, the special covenant name for the God of Israel, which Hosea focused on. And so these terms, and there will be more added to it, also in Isaiah and in Micah. These terms capture what the concerns of the prophets were in terms of both the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Social injustice, and then righteousness before God.
Right.
I like to liken justice to equity on a horizontal plane.
Among human beings.
Yes, and righteousness, a vertical plane, truthfulness and honesty before God.
Right.
And then faithfulness is the characteristic of God. He is faithful to covenant, even when Israel isn't. And knowledge of God is very close to what Paul means by faith.
Yes, it is. Because knowledge of God doesn't just mean knowing about God or knowing that God exists. It might be better translated the acknowledgement of God.
I use the word intimacy.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Intimacy with God.
Acknowledgement of God is closer to this idea of faith, like you were talking about. Actually, a recognition, not just that God exists, but of a relationship.
A commitment in relationship. Yeah.
So those words, that's very helpful to see some of the great theme words that go through this passage, but also through all the teachings of the 8th century prophets. Righteousness, our right relationship with God, justice in our relationship with others. And notice in verse 4, the references to the poor and the needy there.
Yes.
That is precisely what the 8th century prophets scolded the Israelites for.
The monarchy and the army.
Especially the monarchy, yes.
Yeah.
Especially the monarchy. Back at the beginning of chapter 10, meaning woe to you who make iniquitous decrees, who write oppressive laws, who turn aside the needy from justice and rob the poor of my people of their rights. Their widows are your spoil. You make the orphans your prey. And there he's speaking to the leaders.
Yeah, the social institutions, economic, the royalty, the nobility, the army, those that have power. And he's just, they as a group just are very outspoken against such abuse of power.
Right. And so in the age of the restoration of the remnant, they're going to be living out God's will in terms of a just and equitable relationship with those who are in need.
Now, something we have not added to the remnant theology, and that is what we have in this lesson. The shoot that comes up from the stump. Now, we all know what it means. You cut down a tree, you got a stump there, and then there comes out a little shoot. I once planted a sourwood tree, and the trunk died. And then, lo and behold, there came a little shoot. And I said, okay, you want to behave like that? Go ahead. I let the shoot live. And now it is a beautiful tree.
Yep. I've got a sour gum.
A black gum?
Black gum. There we go. Black gum in my yard that did the same thing. A storm blew it down, and all these little shoots started coming out, and I tried to lop them back for a while.
And it persisted.
I finally gave up, and there was one dominant shoot that just came up, and now there's a tree there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now that's the image here.
This branch, this shoot or branch as it's called here, is referred to with the pronoun he, as if it's a person.
Yes.
How are we to understand that, do you think?
This is a metaphor. And the metaphor is describing the leader of the restored remnant. And we see that leader described in chapter 9, a passage that always has to go with chapter 11. We don't have time to read it, but you'll see there is a boy king.
Yeah, our readers will remember, for unto us a child is born.
a son is given.
A son is given.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is the character that we have, the shoot that comes up from the stump of Jesse. Mm-hmm. Jesse is the whole line of kings going through David and coming up to Hezekiah in Isaiah's time. Mm-hmm. And that then there will be a figure from that Davidic line that one day will lead the rebuilt remnant. Mm-hmm. And it will be a boy king. Mm-hmm. Now that is full of all kinds of meaning, because boy kings, in one place, is a description of a weak, ineffective government. But what we have is two boy kings in the history of Judah.
Yeah.
One who went before Hezekiah and one who came after Hezekiah,
Joash and Josiah.
And Josiah, yes.
And they were wonderful kings because in their youthfulness and innocence, they put their trust in the priests of Yahweh and were able to be influenced by godly influences and accomplish wonderful things for the kingdom.
Now this boy king, our king who comes from the line of David, gets a name in later years. He gets a title, and that title is Mashiach in Hebrew. Messiah, which translates in the Greek as Kyrios.
Anointed one.
The anointed one.
Christos, the anointed
yes.
one. Yeah.
Pardon my Greek.
So, would we call this a messianic prophecy then?
I think so.
Yeah, it is. So, in a messianic prophecy, we see the prophet describing forces at work in the will of God among the people to bring about his purposes. And here, in Isaiah's context, those purposes were brought about by a restored remnant who would be led by a leader from the line of David.
Yeah, now there you've got the whole picture of where the idea of Jesus as Messiah came from. It comes out of these passages and many others. Like when you get into the post-exilic prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, you get two messiahs. One priestly and the other one royal. And and of course in the New Testament, Jesus combines them.
Right. So it's inevitable that as Christians we look back through our knowledge of Jesus and see that he was the culmination of this trajectory of restoration of the remnant and the lifting up of a king in the tradition of David.
Yes.
Jesus was in the line of David.
Now, there's one term that is characteristic of these prophets that we haven't mentioned or said anything about, and that is the word shalom, peace. And we have the title, The Peaceful Kingdom. That leads me to the picture I remember when I was a little boy in Sunday school. A painting, The Peaceable Kingdom by Edward Hicks.
I'm sure our viewers have seen reproductions of this somewhere.
Well, that's understandable, since Edward Hicks, who was a Quaker, dwelt on, Quakers are people of peace.
Peace-loving people.
Yes, and hostile to war. And so Edward Hicks actually painted The Peaceable Kingdom 62 versions.
Wow.
That's one. The Quakers didn't like him painting these non-religious things, so he painted, and they're all different.
Yeah, but they all picture
lions and
various animals
bears
together, and usually then a toddler sitting on the ground surrounded by these beasts.
The one that's most famous, he is standing among them, and there is a brook, a stream of water on the left side of the picture. And so he really made the most out of this. this
We're talking
little
about
passage that
verse
we have.
6 and following,
Yes.
where we have this picture of wild animals, predators, being with domestic animals, and there's no hostility or preying upon them. And there is once again, a child is mentioned prominently here.
Was another characteristic in this whole thing. I don't know if most people notice it or not. The lion will eat straw like the ox in verse 7.
Well, oxen don't eat straw. They eat hay or grass. They don't eat straw.
The word in the text is very definitely
It is
straw.
definitely straw. That's interesting.
And I think this is something to keep in mind. And furthermore, lions cannot eat straw or hay or grass. Their mechanism.
Their teeth are for the tearing of meat, not for the chewing of cereal grains.
And they can't chew the cud. They don't have the stomach mechanism.
Don't have the stomach for it.
Very good. So what do we have here? It's like the whole world is going to be remade. Things that are so basic to the survival of the fittest that we see in the world around us now, that will all be changed.
So there's kind of a recreation going on here.
It's a recreation.
Which of kind of a cosmic picture that he gives. I love the way this passage ends at the end of verse 9 here. It's not just that the remnant will preserve the knowledge of God, or that reconstructed Judah will know about God, but the whole earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. And we referred earlier to this
intimacy with God,
universal theme of all nations flowing to the mountain of the Lord, which is Zion, of course, Jerusalem.
And then remember, in the Garden of Eden, the intimacy between Adam, Eve, and God in the garden.
Yeah.
But there's one thing we got to do right before we run out of time. We've got to add verses 10 and 11.
I'll take 10. You take 10. I'll take 11.
On that day, the root of Jesse shall stand as an ensign to the peoples. Him shall the nation seek, and his dwellings will be glorious.
So this ends with another reference to this root from the stump of Jesse.
What started in 11:1, now the circle is closed, and we come back to it.
And the next verse, verse 11, says, on that day the Lord will extend his hand yet a second time to recover the remnant that is left of his people.
So we're clearly in remnant
context.
Context, yes.
But we also see Jesus, the Messiah, the Anointed One, as the ultimate fulfillment of God's plans for righteousness, justice, faithfulness, knowledge, and peace. And peace.
Absolutely.
The Prince of Peace.
Well, we've begun this long discussion that we're going to have for a month on the theme of the sovereignty of God's superiority, God over all. We're glad you could be with us, and we've gotten a start. Come back. We'll be in Isaiah for 3 more weeks. So I know you want to learn more about the prophet and what he had to say along on this theme. The best to you for this week. God's blessings on you.
This has been In the Word, a study of the International Bible School lesson with Dr. Lee Magnus, Professor Emeritus of Bible from Milligan College, and Dr. Bill Gwaltney, Professor Emeritus of Bible of Milligan College. Join us again next week for another lesson from the International Bible School lesson text. This has been a production of the First Christian Church Television Ministries.